I was speaking to a mate of mine just the other day, a guy called Bruce Bayliss actually, who lives up our way. He's been living in Europe for the year, more or less. I says, how was Europe, Bruce? He says, Fred, it's a mess. We don't know how lucky we are, mate. We don't know how lucky we are. My father-in-law's feeling pretty pleased with himself. He's been living in Greece for the good of his health. I says, how was the climate? And how was your year? He says, the climate's too hot. You can't get a beer. The Sheilas look like blokes, and of course the blokes are all queer. The Turks and the Arabs, well, they live far too near, and if you're going to have a really good time, you might as well live here. He says, you don't know how lucky you are, friend. We don't know how lucky we are. I was down the plough and checkbook night before last. There's a guy down there on the floor with his brain at half-mast. I says, you're looking really bad, mate. Your eyes look like strings. He says, get me an 8, will you, Fred, please? I can't see a thing. We don't know how lucky we are, mate. We don't know how lucky we are. There's a guy I know who lives in town, see him about once a year. He's had a coronary since Easter. He's got a hemorrhage in his ear. He went bankrupt a couple of weeks back, and now his wife left him too. I said, you're looking odd, mate. You're looking queer. What are you going to do? He says, we don't know how lucky we are, friend. He says, we don't know how lucky we are. My stock agent's got a beach house where he spends most of his days. His wife bit the dust down there last year, got eaten by a couple of crays, and his 2 littlest daughters got killed by a whale. I said, are you going down there this year? He says, Fred, right on the nail. We don't know how fortunate we are to have that place. We don't know how propitious are the circumstances, Frederick. So when things are looking really bad, you're thinking of giving it away, remember New Zealand's a cracker, and I reckon come what may, if things get appallingly bad, we all get atrociously poor. If we stand in the queue with our hats on, we can borrow a few million more. We don't know how lucky we are. We just don't realise how fortunate we are. We've no idea of the luck we possess. We just don't know how lucky we all are. I'd like to have a bit of a word with all you people out there who are driving to work this morning. You know, if the dice had rolled the other way, you might have been a Biafran or some other unfortunate little fella, and there's a fair likelihood you wouldn't have had a car at all. So when you're driving in today, pretend you're a fairly lucky sort of person, be a bit generous and pick someone up. Give him a lift, and with any luck you can feel smug for the rest of the day. Mind you, you've got to be a bit careful here. There's no point in going around the place like the good samurai or whatever his name was. I ran into a bit of trouble like this the other day. I was powering along one of the main arteries, and I saw a bloke standing on the side of the road looking like he needed a lift, so I chucked a few anchors out and ground to a bit of a halt, jumped out of the driving department and asked him if he wanted to ride into town, and he just looked at me, so I went over to him and asked him again. Not a flicker. So I went right up to him and told him I didn't have all day to stand around talking to cretinous little people who didn't reply, and he just stared at me, so I clipped him one on the ear and continued into town. Well, this morning I had a visit from Trevor Plod, the local policeman, who served a summons on me for assaulting a garden gnome and clipping a public monument on the side of the Boko. So if you're feeling a bit altruistic, keep an eye out for these gnomes. Well, now the seasons are undergoing their customary miraculous mutation so often mentioned by the poets, or swapping round as we humble non-poets call it, I suppose we've seen the end of the cricket season in England. There was one interesting thing about those games, and that was when someone snuck out in the middle of the night and bashed a few holes in the pitch. They weren't very interesting holes, I'm not saying that. Holes in cricket pitches are not intrinsically interesting, and I'm afraid that's all there is about it. But what was interesting, though, and if I play my cards right I might get to the point soon, was that the next day when all the lads were decked out in their flannels and ready to go, they saw the holes and decided not to play. No go. Look at the holes, shaking of the head, and it's all off. Now, I remember a game we had up home a few years ago, and a fairly important game it was too, and we had it over at Bruce Bayliss's place, as a matter of fact. He's got a bit of flat land out the back where a hill fell over one time after a hurricane. And anyway, we played a few days and everything was going very well when we fronted up one day and someone had ploughed up the area, the pitch and the outfield, and part of the river by mistake and planted it in beans. Actually, it turned out to be Bruce's brother, who was a bit short in the brain department and reckoned if you ploughed at night you weren't bothered by birds eating the seed. He was quite right, of course, but other things turning and went into town and ploughed up the first 4 stories of the post office and planted them in tomatoes. Wasn't a bad crop either. As a matter of fact, one of them became the postmaster. But about the cricket pitch, of course the fast bowlers bit the dust, but some of the bigger furrows took a lot of spin and the game got more interesting as the day wore on. I was surprised to see the professionals give it away over a few minor holes. However, maybe next season they'll smarten their ideas up a bit. I suppose there are a few people out there working up to sitting exams of various sorts, and I'd just like to say that my sympathies go with you. As a matter of fact, I sat an exam myself once a few years back. I didn't do very well in it because I had a bit of a headache. The night before I'd been rubbing a little brandy into my head to settle my nerves, and I think it might have got away on me a bit, and the old brain was feeling a mite sore when the thing started. I thought the questions were very difficult. Actually, it was a maths exam, and I was never very smart with numbers. In fact, I wasn't even supposed to be doing the maths exam, but I'd fronted up on the wrong day, and once I was in there, they wouldn't let me out for a couple of hours. The first question was about calculating the compound interest on the angle of refraction of the parabolic circle travelling at the speed of light past 3 men who took 4 days to mow a lawn of 6 acres. Well, as you can understand, I didn't see the solution exactly jumping out and hitting me between the eyes, so I settled back and delivered my old favourite, an essay on what I did in the holidays. Then I got down on the floor and crawled out the window and went home. I got 4% for that exam. I said I got the answer wrong, but they gave me a few marks for me reasoning, which was quite surprising because when I sat the English exam I wrote the same essay and got 3% for it. So it's really just a matter of luck, so keep at it and try to avoid getting headaches of the type I mentioned earlier on. Yeah, g'day. Is Trev there, please? G'day, Mrs. Burke. Yeah, it's Bruce here. Bruce. Trev's friend Bruce. Is he there? Yeah, righto. Yeah, g'day, Trev. Yeah, it's Bruce here, boy. Bruce. Yeah. How you going there, all right? Story. Hey, what'd you get up to last night, boy? Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I saw you weren't in the boozer. Yeah, me? We'll talk about laugh, Trev. Yeah, well, me and the boys went down to the boozer. Yeah, you know the boys, don't you, Trev? Yeah, you know the boozer, Trev. Yeah, we met up with this cousin of Derek's down here for this big court case. But, yeah, rape, I think he said, Trev. Anyway, so we all got pissed, you see, then someone reckons there's this big party out Wainui there. You know out Wainui there, don't you, Trev? Yeah. So we all get in the car, you see, Trev. We'll talk about a crush, boy. Yeah. So, well, we get over the hill there, out to Wainui, get out the shut. Look, in 5 minutes, boy, we tore the place apart. Not a stick standing. This cousin of Derek's, boy, Christ, can he break things? Oh, you know, doors, windows, bottles, glasses, juggers' arms, birds' backs, no trouble. Yeah. So after we'd done a bit of damage, you see, these juggers decided to throw us out. What? Yeah, probably queer, Trev. Yeah, so anyway, they all come towards us, you see. Well, this cousin of Derek's, boy, he knocks out about 8 of these queers, whips outside for a quick chunder because he's so pissed. Yeah. He comes back inside and bowls this queer's mother. Yeah, we'll talk about laugh, Trev. Yeah. Well, so they decide to call the cops, you see. Well, this cousin of Derek's, boy, is already in a power of shit with the cops, so we decide to piss off. We all get in the car. This cousin of Derek's, boy, talk about drink piss. You know that dozen I keep in the back of the car for getting birds pissed? What? Well, that's got bugger all to do with it, Trev. Yeah. Anyway, this cousin of Derek's, boy, he knocks the whole lot off in about 10 minutes. Yeah. So then he wants to drive me car, Trev. Yeah, we'll talk about big, Trev, and talk about strong. Yeah, so I let him drive my car. Yeah. Well, we're coming down the Wainui Hill. About halfway down, there's this big corner. Yeah, the one with the cliff, Trev. So over we go, Trev. We'll talk about blood, boy. Yeah, no bucket of an know how we got home. Wouldn't have a clue. Trev, what I actually wanted to know is, can I borrow your car tonight? What do you mean it's bugger? Oh, Trev, I forgot to tell you. I've sent this cousin of Derek's round to see you. Yeah, righto. We'll pick it up at 7:30. See you. Have you ever thought about opera? You want to give it a bit of thought if you've got nothing better to do. Anyone can write an opera, so if things aren't going terribly well in your line of country, I recommend that you sit down and turn out something fairly turgid and weighty in the musical line. Of course, you can't write an opera about everyday things. You don't get many operas about a bloke going into town and putting a deposit down on a couple of hundredweight of pig food. They tend to be more about mythology. So you'll have to make up some tedious story about the place, or a few thousand long-haired Germans running up and down the Rhine looking for their rings or something. The story really has to be European to have any real class and appeal. And aside from that, all you need is a thin, reedy little bloke who falls in love all the time, an enormous Sheila who thunders in somewhere near the end and stabs herself, and a slow guy weighing in at about 35 stone who comes on from time to time and grunts the storyline out in a voice so low you've got to be a bison to catch the details of it. But if you need a few bob to carry things over the difficult Christmas period, knock out an opera. They earn a fortune in Europe and they're subsidised over there. I'd like to have a few words with anyone out there who has trouble sleeping. I was talking to a bloke the other day who has enormous trouble sleeping. Mind you, he's an enormous bloke. But he reckons he watches telly until the end of the National Anthem, and then he wanders about the house cleaning things up and getting ready for the morning. He reckons he's tried taking tablets, but he reckons that just slows down his cleaning operation, and he's tried having a few snorts around midnight, but he reckons that just livens him up and he's on the phone in a matter of moments getting his mates around for an all-nighter. So obviously there is a problem. I was listening to Parliament the other day and a solution cropped up. I was listening to see what the lads down there are going to do about the economy, and once the debate got going I felt my eyes glazing and the lids were coming down at high speed, and just as the honourable member was about to make a point I dropped off altogether. I got the old Sheila and a cross-section of Trevor's in and sat them down to see if the effect was general, and sure enough in a very short time they were all snoozing away with the opposition spokesman on worm rot tearing into it in the background. I watched all this from the kitchen so I wouldn't have to hear it and nod off again myself. And to test the theory, I went down to Parliament one day last week and I was not surprised to see half the members were being affected in the same fashion. So it appears that it's a pretty general sort of effect, and if you're wanting to get into a fairly comatose state, I recommend that you listen to the lads on the hill. They reckon there's one thing a man should never do, and that's teach his old Sheila to drive. As a matter of fact, I had a crack at it the other day, and after deep consideration, I think I'd probably go along with the theory. The old Sheila's been getting a bit independent this year, and she's been on at me and the Trevs to let her get behind the controls of the tractor. Now, I'm in total agreement that there's no reason she shouldn't be out there ploughing from dawn till dusk with the best of them, but the actual business of teaching her to work the thing's been a trifle tricky. First of all, I drove it around and she walked alongside just to see how everything worked and watched me using all the levers and things. And after about 15 or 20 miles of that, she got very impatient and I had to let her sit in the pilot's chair and have a bash. She turned it on, bounced across the lambing paddock in little 6-foot bursts, knocked down a chain and a half of precision fencing and went into the river at about 45. When I got there, she had the hydraulic on and she brought a big section of the bank down over the back of the vehicle, and the front was stuck straight up in the air with steam pouring out of it. After a while we got her out and asked her what went wrong, and she reckoned the tractor was faulty. As a matter of fact, we found the gear stick in a handbag later, which might explain part of the problem. She didn't do too badly though, and she can have another go any time she likes as soon as she's dug the tractor out. We gave her a shovel and a packed lunch, and she comes in every now and again with a wheel or a piston or something, and she should have most of it out before the rains come again and the situation looks really hopeless. I discovered an interesting thing the other day. I was browsing through some books at home looking for some retention money I dropped in there for a rainy day, and it's been a bit damp up our way recently. Anyway, I come across a book the old Sheila gave us for a birthday present. It wasn't actually me birthday, but she'd driven the tractor into a big 6-foot hole in the river, and it tends to be me birthday when something like that happens. The book was called A Child's Guide to the Universe, and it's not a bad little story either. I went straight to the section on the weather, of course, being an agrarian type of person, and I discovered how winds get built. There are two types of stuff in the air. There's the low pressure areas and the high pressure ones. The high pressure ones generally park themselves above hot bits of ground, and the low pressure areas tend to live out at sea and other places where they don't get in the road. Now the high ones, for some reason or other, don't like the idea of the low ones much, and every time they spot one they swoop in and turn the whole area into a medium pressure zone. Of course, as you can imagine, this takes a while, and by the time it's done another low pressure area's arrived on the scene, and the high's got to pull itself together and swoop back down again and clobber the new low. Well, this goes on more or less all the time, especially in the winter when they've got to keep moving to keep the circulation going. Now, of course, sometimes things get a bit dodgy when they're charging about the place and they all run across a hill or something, and the high, as well as filling in the low bits, has got to keep regrouping itself after it bounces into the hills. The whole thing's really quite fascinating, and if you've got nothing better to do, I'd advise you to study the weather. It's a lot like life. It's not all wind either. I was reading a very interesting section on rain, and if the past wind is anything to go by, we all ought to familiarise ourselves with rain and its many facets. What happens, you see, is that a whole lot of rain comes down all over the place, and then the big yellow comes out and heats everything up so the rain dissolves or something and goes back up to where it came from. Seems a bit pointless, doesn't it? You see, when the steam rises off the road or the roof or your boots or something, it's all motoring back up to the rainery, and when a few 100,000 gallons are up there, they let it all come down again. It's quite strange and weird to think that when you boil the water, the steam that sticks to the windows is going to come back in another life and wash away a bridge. That is, unless I've got it all wrong, which I suppose I might have.
One, two, three, four.
God the nations at thy feet. Yes, indeed, amongst the lovely land we meet. Hear our voices we entreat. Yes, indeed, and to God be fed in the New Zealand. Get in behind.